All right. All right. I'd like to call to order the Fraser Board of Trustees meeting on Wednesday, February 19th at 6:01 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Katie Fisher,
Adam Quickling,
Peggy Smith,
Julie White,
Louis Gregory,
Katie Souls.
And Brian Cirkvenik. Could I have an approval of the agenda?
So move.
second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on, can I have an approval of the consent agenda that has the minutes for February 5th, 2025, and a CDOT letter of support for Berthoud Pass avalanche mitigation?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
A second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, we will move on to open forum. This is for business not on the agenda. Anyone in the room can approach the podium, speak for 3 minutes, or if there are people online, they can raise their hands. Seeing none in the audience here. Anyone online? We got Avid Trails, it looks like, and that's about it. So we'll be talking to you guys later. Okay, moving on. Discussion and possible action regarding the treasurer's report. Lori. There you are.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. Oh, I forgot, you guys have the clicker. Yeah, that's high density. Yeah. In the future, oh, a lot of years from now, if we're not careful. Oh. Okay. Good. Hopefully this is the right one. Yep, there we go. Overview. Okay, and here we are. With our January look at our funds. Thank you. That obviously our general fund. The reserves are getting used up a bit for the St. Louis Landing engineering and construction. We had a big invoice come in for all the concrete from Phase Construction. But we are expecting reimbursement from the More Housing Now infrastructure grant. Oh no, excuse me, St. Louis is Big Valley. Clayton's Court is Phase Construction for the concrete there. So both projects took big steps forward. We had some big expenditures, but then we had a very successful and a big thumbs up from DOLA on our grant submittals. They like how we got kudos and gold stars from DOLA, that our presentation reports and things are thumbs up with DOLA. So I'm expecting reimbursements for both of those to the tune of around it's 500,000, 600,000. There's a big amount coming in soon. So, and just an FYI, I was looking this up and checking out. I'm not obsessive about the Federal Reserve, but I do kind of keep an eye on them. There are no expected interest rate cuts from the Federal Reserve as of their last meeting, January 29th. The goal is still the 2% inflation, and inflation just ticked up to 3% just recently. So they're still being very cautious, and that's going to stay pretty still, which is not horrible. That means our interest on the Colorado Trust is going to maintain about 4.6%. So good and bad. Okay, then we have your sales tax revenue. Now the February sales tax revenue is the January collection of the December sales tax. The December sales tax that performance was excellent. If you look closely, and can you make that a little bigger? There's a little green dot on the left side where it says January at the very top. That's your December sales tax. And that came in, it came in 5.68% higher than 2024.
Wow.
Woohoo, great start to the year. So, and obviously I'm sure everybody, we all tried to go to Safeway, didn't we? It was pretty busy, so a lot of good funds were spent here. Oh, come on. Uh-oh.
Next slide.
Okay, well, that one's not moving. Okay, there it goes. There's your short-term rental sales tax revenue. Look at January, the farthest one on the left is 2025, that big tall one. Again, short-term rentals had a great month too. That was 16% of total revenue, and it is 11.69% higher than the same time January 2024. So some good increases. And then last but not least, the remote sellers were still down around 6% of your total revenue. Not a little increase, I kind of expected bigger, more Christmas shopping, but it looks like, it stayed pretty similar to the same time last year in 2024. It was maybe about, it went up about 3%. So, but I was thinking there was going to be more Christmas shopping online, but maybe a lot of people shop local. Any questions?
I know you weren't here in 2021, but there's a huge spike in December of 2021 on the STR sheet. So on slide 7, I'm just curious if anyone remembers what was going on then.
December 21.
Yeah.
Well, we had all that money come from the feds. Remember after
Yeah,
2020?
everybody
Everybody got $2,000 of play money.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
there was play money,
it
and
just
that was
got up
kind of just as
Right.
things were getting reopened, where you could start to move. Not
Yeah.
necessarily. Actually, what happened a lot during that year, travel was allowed, but nobody was going to Europe or going overseas. We had to stay here. So, yeah, there was some big months in 2021.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know, too
I
bad we
say that's
can't.
because of the, our jump in inflation, but it kept the nation afloat.
right.
Yeah, it kept
Um,
things afloat.
I was thinking that was still in COVID, but I think that was right when they were opening everything back up for the most
Yeah.
part. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it was just getting going. I was hosting back then, so ski area, weird but open, having fun,
Right.
spacing each other out, wearing our masks. But no, people were coming. They wanted to get outside.
Right, right. Cool. Any other questions for Lori?
Okay.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to resolution 2025-0203, adopting a new water and wastewater rates and service fees.
Mayor, Board of Trustees, good evening. Paul Johnson, Public Works Director. Before you have the resolution to adopt new water and wastewater service fees for the town of Fraser. These were last updated in 2015. They went into effect at January 1st of 2016. So the current rates we have of $153 per quarter for SFEs, and the rates of $1.50 for tier 1, $3 for tier 2, and $6 for tier 3 have been in place for 9 years. This process started back in May of 2023 when the board approved the study of current water rates. And we hired Raftellus to do that rate study. They first presented on January 3rd of 24 at a board workshop. And then subsequently, they came back with some changes that were recommended by the board. And due to the election, there was some delay in getting them back and getting the new board up to speed. They presented again as part of the regular board meeting on September 4th, 2024, with a new recommended rate structure. And it's just taken some time to get to this point with crowded board agendas and holidays. So if you look through the staff briefing, I'm sorry, it printed a little blurry, ended up blurry. It has the financial plan assumptions, the inflation factors on operations and maintenance, cost of utilities, so electrical, the cost of chemicals, and then the cost of capital replacement. It lists our reserve targets, talks about the new water rate structure changes, addressing the structure to better align costs between low volume and high volume users. One of the requests was to make sure that the smaller properties that aren't using much water aren't being adversely affected. And so it's changed to an EQR setting. You can see that the current rates are going to go up only on the volume metric rates. So the quarterly service fee will stay the same at 153 on the water side. It is going up on the utility side, but we don't have consumption charges on the wastewater side. So we're going to go up to $1.77 on tier 1, which is for the first 15,000 gallons. It'll go to $3.53 for tier 2, which is 15 to 30,000. It'll then go to $7.05 for tier 3, which is over 30,000 gallons per quarter. So the overall increase in the quarterly bill, so if you only use a 7,000 gallons, it'll be $1 on the water side. If you use 10,000 gallons and you have 1.2 EQRs, so you have 4 bedrooms instead of the 3, it'll go up $30 per quarter. And then if you go into the 1.6 EQR, so that's a 6-bedroom house using almost 20,000 gallons, it'll go up about $90 per quarter. So these are the rates that we've talked through. Raftellus has presented them twice. We're not changing the plant investment fees. The plant investment fees seem to be on target per their analysis. So we're just looking to get a resolution to change these rates the start of Q3 so that we can make the change in the billing software to go from SFEs to EQRs to better align with what's going on with bathrooms and bedrooms and just kind of make it equitable across there. The biggest change to the rates could possibly affect commercial businesses that are don't have the right EQRs currently in the system. So, or they're paying a really, really low rate because they have, for some reason, they put in a really, really small meter for something that services a whole lot more people than a family.
So Paul, I'm not clear. I don't have any issues with the usage and all that. I'm just still kind of confused about that shift from SFE to EQR, and that does not affect the base rate that someone pays if they have
It
a
does.
higher EQR?
It'll change the base rate, but the base rate is staying the same. We're going to stay at
Okay.
$153.
So where does it address in this, that change in base rate and a definition of EQR? I don't see that in here. Is it somewhere in here? It's
So
part of this policy that we can
One
identify.
EQR is basically equivalent to an SFE. It's 3 bedrooms or 3 bathrooms. And then it's an additional 0.2 for every additional bedroom or bathroom.
Okay, so, where is that in what we're approving tonight? Where is that explained?
That was in our
Was that approved?
workshop
previ-
meeting.
It was in the
Yeah.
workshop and in the previous presentation to the.
Right, no, and I support that, but I don't know, as I was just reading through, I didn't see where it was identified, easily identifiable. And I don't know.
Can-
Where's it? Where is it in the document that because we're approving a document tonight,
You're
just
just-
a rate increase or,
It's just a resolution to change the rates,
okay.
and then to an
Okay.
EQR.
I'll look back.
It's not an ordinance. It's not codified.
Okay,
And if I recall, this changes to align it with the sewer rate
Yeah.
structure.
Or sewer
A-
restructure
And
at the
it's,
wastewater treatment.
And it's a good change. I totally
yeah,
support it.
yeah.
I totally
So
support it, but I just
SFE
felt
is
like
the-
it wasn't as transparent as it should have
SFE is
been.
a single family equivalent. And then EQR is an equivalent residential unit.
Yeah.
So on the wastewater side, they assign those a certain flow of gallons. On the water side, we base it on bedrooms.
Yeah,
So the sewer is a flat rate.
The sewer is the flat rate that's going up to 140. Yeah. I have it here, from 137.50 to 148.50. And that's to help us be prepared for any plant expansions that the town is responsible for their, I think it's roughly 34% of any expansion that happens at the plant. Also our portion of maintenance on a 25-year-old plant. So there's a lot of maintenance that's needs to be happening. A lot of things are being discussed at the JFOC meetings to spend roughly 3 to 4 million a year over the next 4 to 5 years. So making sure that we have the funds available to take care of that going forward.
I'm just curious, why do we not have tiers for commercial usage?
It was determined that they wanted to keep that, previous board had determined that they wanted that to be just a flat rate to encourage businesses and not discourage high consumption on a restaurant or something that uses a lot of water.
And I think the grade school was a huge consideration.
Can you,
The grade school was a huge consideration in
Grade
that as
school?
well. Yes.
couldn't we exempt them? I'm just curious, because if someone's using a lot of water, shouldn't they pay more? Even if it's a business?
well, 705 per 1,000 gallons, anything over 20,000.
Well, they'll pay
Well, no, but
$1.77.
So, what's that
The
here?
commercial doesn't have any tiers.
Yeah, let's
I mean,
go.
it's a,
Well, it's, but they're subject like the tier, no tiers?
no tiers.
So let's
No,
look
it
at the
says right
resolution.
in the resolution, it
18%.
says the water consumption rate for commercial and mixed use remains the same, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
Okay,
So there are
yeah, so I
tiers.
say, look
Where's
at
that?
look at the resolution.
It's in the actual
That's
resolution.
actually what
well,
we're
this is-
approving. So,
Then this slide's not accurate then. In the presentation?
Each tier is the same.
Yeah, the tiers are all.
There's,
One
yeah, they're all the same for
Yeah.
commercial. It'll be $1.77 up from $1.50, but it doesn't change.
Right, there's no tiers.
There's no tiers. No, and this was,
There is no.
we had this discussion at the workshop and then we had the discussion at the board meeting, and it was, the direction I was given was to try to
Yeah.
align it to EQRs so that the larger homes that have more water use and more people there.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean.
yeah,
that,
which is
but
great.
I'm just curious about the commercial usage.
It does say here. So they're subject to, well.
The tier is all the
so
same. It's the
175
same.
for that 1, 2, 3.
It's the same, it's the same rate.
Car wash should go to
Water
quarter
So,
and
so what,
5
for
seconds.
commercial,
One
you're
second.
right, 177.
The same rate.
But we do need more commercial at this stage. I don't think we want to discourage it.
And if that's something, I mean, so this is setting the rates until we bring another resolution. My intention is next year is to try and bring a resolution, or we could change this resolution to match inflation. So the CPI for Lakewood and our, our closest localities, so that we're not constantly trying to jump rates astronomically to keep up with inflation. If we just allow them to move with inflation, rather than have to come back every 5 years and do a big rate change.
Yeah.
That's
This
what I
would
was
allow
gonna
it.
say. Do we want to put a simple 1% per year, in this? Just if inflation goes up or down, whatever, 1% wouldn't do it, but I don't know, some
I mean,
percentage.
this is,
increase.
my calculation, 18% increase in commercial rates, right? I don't know when was it changed before? How long has it been?
It's been 9 years since we changed rates.
So that's 2% a year, right? It's not much. That's not keeping up with inflation.
This is where this is where Raftellus settled based on the conversation at the workshop and the concerns of some of the board members that the person living on a fixed income in a house they've been in for 50 years
Yeah.
can't afford 127 or a 270% increase in their water rates.
Yep.
Trying to avoid what happened in Granby on their north system where they had 150% increase. Currently their quarterly bills are $550 and ours will go up to ours will go from 308 to 311 roughly on the average.
Yeah.
So
I don't have a problem with the residential rates. I was just questioning the commercial rates.
that's a discussion for the board,
I
a
don't
decision for
know.
the board if they want to tier the commercial side, what that looks like. Potentially hundreds to thousands of dollars additional per quarter on commercial.
I think our commercial businesses are struggling.
So currently with this
To stay afloat,
change,
so-
if we take one of our largest water consumers, their bill will go up $150 per quarter
As of the resolution.
as
on
of
the
this
table.
resolution.
And this rate structure was created to be, not as a revenue increaser, but the goal behind it was conservation. To have those high users cut back. I think the discussions at that time were that we do not want to hamper our businesses in that manner.
Right.
We want them to be able to operate. So,
No,
I mean, I guess I'm saying,
And if you
I
look-
think they should pay their fair share.
oh, yeah.
We shouldn't be subsidizing our businesses for their water usage and, you know, I don't know what the right answer is, but
Well, and I think part of it was the ratio as well. If you have very few businesses and you have a lot of homes, so where's your impact when you're trying to implement conservation measures? You're going to get it out of the residential units when you have this kind of disparity between businesses and housing units. So
was the goal to fund the water system or encourage conservation?
It was conservation was the goal of the tiered rate when we created it. It was not a revenue increase.
So we're as we look at, I included the items from the 10-year CIP. A lot of those items, as we've experienced over the last 2 years, we're chasing grants for. So in here where it talks about meter replacement and meter testing, we've replaced 95% of the North System with the grant that we received and the funding that we've budgeted. The same is going for next year. Lucas currently has an active Water Smart grant to finish that project out, kind of waiting on seeing how that goes. A lot of funding in 2026. We're chasing funding to do the looping in here for up at the top of Ptarmigan, all of those dead ends up there. So chasing federal funding there. So doing a lot of grants, obviously, to fund this in order to, if we had used the rates to fund all of the infrastructure costs that are needed, I think the increase was 278% on everybody. Based on the way the agreements we have in place, that's the only route we have is when you look at potentially a new water treatment plant or anything to do with our water rights along St. Louis Creek, it would obviously be looking at going out on the bond market and then chasing whatever grants we can, because we're limited on what we get there as far as plant investment fees to pay for this. But anything we can do to get federal funding we're pursuing every grant we possibly can. We get a lot of grants brought to us that we don't qualify for because we're already getting it on another side. So we're just trying to pace everything out. So the next time we can apply for one of the big federal grants is 2026. We'll be going for that to do all the infrastructure in the upper Ptarmigan area to get all that done. So I'm trying to just get the rates in line with where they need to be to keep the water fund stable, and then chase grants to get what we can. These rates will only bring in an additional 200,000 a year. Not like we're putting a bunch of money in there with this, but it's the first step to getting where we need to be.
okay.
So the only thing that I'm worried about with this is it reminds me of the T-Rex project in Denver. They put a plan together to build the highway for the existing number of cars, and the project was going to be done 7 years later. And it was already past capacity by the time it was finished. So if we're not putting some sort of annual increase on this, then we're constantly going to be increasing rates by a huge jump instead of just 2% per year or something like that. Something that people can.
I do agree that I think there should be something tied to either CPI or we put a percentage in there. We could bring this back January of next year with a new resolution that's tying it to that going forward.
But we need to move ahead with our rates.
At some point, we need to move it. We do have some work to do between the passing of this resolution and going into effect to make sure that our EQR numbers in the system are accurate. I know we have a couple that are not accurate, so getting those in line before we make a change, so that we're billing everybody properly, that you're paying for what you're using and that you're paying for what you have built.
And EQR is codified now in our, how we do business. Going from SF.
We
to
have it
EQR
codified in multiple
places.
locations. And
Great, perfect,
it's in the water,
great. That's all I need to know.
it's in some of, it's in our
Okay.
JFOC, it's in our wastewater agreement.
Okay,
It's codified in one of the water rights.
great.
Is based on EQRs, the other water rights based on SFE. So trying to bring everything in line.
Yeah,
It's very hard to take our north system and our south system and compare apples to apples because they're slightly different in their volumetric amounts because of the way they're based. So trying to find a nice level playing field to make sure everybody's paying the same.
You said this resolution said the rates were changed in 19. Is that right?
That's the last time we passed a resolution to change the rates, but they didn't change. They stayed the same.
They didn't change the rates?
It was a continuance
Oh, okay.
of the last
I
rate.
mean, I think, to Brian's point, I think we should look at it maybe annually and see where we are, see if we need to tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
Instead of having a big rate increase.
And it looks like we
well,
looks like we
this is
tried to
very
do it
big.
annually for a while and then nothing happened for 6 years until we started this in 23. And then going back, there was a couple resolutions, there's some gaps and so I think if we tie it to something at the next resolution, then we can prevent having to come every year unless there's some crazy event that happens that's catastrophic failure or something that we have to deal with. But
Okay.
Trying to keep the rates on the ratepayers as minimal increase as possible with our current agreements.
Cool. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2025-0203, adopting rates and fees for water and sewer service in the town of Fraser. I'll second.
Further discussion? Is there anyone in the public that wanted to add anything before we vote? I'm not sure if we have any online.
Do we have any
Online.
Is it showing any hands or anything? Anybody out there? Okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you. That's been a long haul getting there. Thank you.
Okay. Resolution 2025-0204, approving Avid Bike Park conceptual design. Sarah Catanzarite.
Hello, Sarah Gatanzarite, Assistant Town Manager. Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. I'm just going to do a brief introduction and then I will hand it over to Avid, who's with us online to present their updated conceptual designs. As you know, back in December 2024, the board authorized a bike park construction contract, which authorized the town manager to sign a contract with Avid Trails for finalized design and construction of the Fraser Bike Park. The bidding process had allowed prospective contractors to suggest modifications to the conceptual design to enhance the quality of the bike park and user experience based on the builder's professional expertise, or to recognize cost savings where it would make sense without sacrificing overall quality. So Avid had presented in their proposal some suggested modifications to the conceptual. It does remain within that footprint and contains similar elements. Once they were awarded the contract, they visited Fraser in mid-December, met with town staff as well as our project partners and stakeholders. And then they got to work on enhancing that conceptual design that had been presented in their proposal. So they presented this design to town staff and then later to our project stakeholders, and have received positive feedback from both of those groups regarding the current design that is included in your packet. Once we do have an approved conceptual design, we will work with Avid to really hone in on drainage and landscaping designs and ensuring that we don't have any sediment running off into the Fraser River. We're working on setting up a meeting with CPW in early March to make sure they're on board with the proposed drainage plans, and that addresses any concerns they may have. We've also continued to work on funding for the Fraser Bike Park. We do look to be well positioned to be able to build the bike park this summer. So we have our GOCO application going in front of their board for final approval in mid-March. So without the GOCO funding, we have about a little over $500,000. And then with that GOCO funding, that puts us in pretty good position. We're also going to apply for OLRT funds, and we can continue to do fundraising. So with that, I will turn it over to Avid to present their conceptual.
Thank you, Sarah. Can everyone see my screen?
Nope, black. There you are.
Awesome. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to walk you all through the updated design for the bike park. One of the things we really did focus on in some of our conversations was some of the theming elements that get pulled into the bike park and really thinking about the pioneering heritage and ranch lifestyle. And how some of those components play into the design of some of the skills features and also some of the fencing and structures around and also some of the signage. So this slide just kind of touches on some imagery that supports some of that, as well as some of the planting, obviously, that you see in some of these prairie landscapes and how that ties into the open space around some of the trails and the skills features. So really hasn't changed too much from probably the last diagram you've seen, but I'll walk you through this zone diagram and kind of we'll get into each little zone separately as we continue through the presentation. So in this, this plan shows the proposed parking as it's been designed, and the white line and trail system within this is the existing multi-use trail system. One of the things that we were really kind of looking at and focusing on is ensuring that there's separation between the bike park users and the actual overall park users within the space. So some of those areas where you see the tags calling out fencing are those zones where some of the bike features or some of the areas where the trail systems are come in very close proximity to each other. So we just want to make sure we're ensuring that there's separation between users. We are showing a small additional spur from the existing trails that connects down to the hub area or that main gathering space within the bike park. The zones shown in tan here are what we're calling the multi-directional trails. So those are just the connector trails that get you from each zone within the bike park to the next space, basically, or back to the start. So quickly, just kind of starting the central hub there. We'll go into the beginner skills trail area, and then we will go into the adaptive or skills trail. That's that linear darker green component, the pump track areas, as well as the jump lines. So in this image board, it's just starting to touch on some of the design character for the spaces. So this is really just focusing on the central hub, and the access trails or those connector multi-use trails that were tan in the diagram on the previous slide. Really just making sure that this is centrally located with high visibility, providing shade for visitors using the space, having a central location where bike racks are, where some of the bike repair station components are, and signage, as well as a naturalized additional playscape within that space. So kind of that top center image there. The other thing that we're proposing along the access trails are actually having some of these integrated skills features that really kind of play off the nature. So currently within the park system, there are a series of boulders within certain spaces. So we want to kind of add to that and pull some of those adjacent to those multi-use and connecting trails. So there are little fun spaces for riders to kind of pop off and ride some skills features as they're connecting between each zone. So this diagram is really just kind of zoomed in on that overall plan and focused on that central hub space. As you can see, just ensuring that that is located in close proximity, especially to the beginner areas. So to the north, really being that beginner skills area. And then to the south is where the beginner pump track and the intermediate advanced pump track are. Those purple triangular shapes are really just focused on view sheds and Just kind of highlighting the fact that this being centrally located has high visibility to all zones, not only within the bike park, but also to the trails adjacent at the pond. And a series of images here, just kind of tagging in general locations of where those components would be. So again, the shade structure in the central triangular, between those triangular shapes and the rectangular wet box, having some of those skills and play areas, as well as the bike racks and the repair station within that zone. And then the darker blue arrowed lines are those connector and multi-use trails that get you from the parking lot to the center core of the bike park and also connect you back to starts and finishes and to the central core. So some of these images again are just showing some of those skills features that will run along those trail systems. One additional thing is just ensuring we have appropriate signage in the right location. So at every gateway into the bike park, some information about the bike park and ensuring user safety, as well as in the central hub. Beginner skills area. So this is where we really try to lean into the theming, the ranch theming within the overall bike park, and this concept of having gateways and some elements that kind of play homage back to the train systems and transportation that really created connectivity to the area of Fraser. So these images are just kind of capturing some of those elements and how they also integrate with some of the natural features as well as some of the prefab features that fall within this zone. So just kind of walk you through the beginner skills area. Again, this start area is directly adjacent to the central hub. The interloop or intercores shown in the green lines here are leaning more towards the very beginner and balanced bike riders. And then around the exterior edges of the beginner skill zone, we start to pull in some of these custom elements and skinnier features or more progressive bike skills features within the space. So what you see here in a series of quick hand sketches is starting to look at some of those custom elements that start to play back to that theming and character that was shown in the previous images. And then also integrating some of the natural skills features. So everything from boulders and skinnies and rock gardens and rollers and berms, all the things that you'll start to see within a trail that you start to experience as a young rider. This is some imagery supporting the linear, adaptive, and skills trail. So again, this is kind of taking it to the next level. But one of the things we heard in some of our conversations with our adaptive consultants, as well as some adaptive riders that we've worked with in the past, is really thinking about what that experience is on an adaptive bike, which is very different from what you experience on a traditional cycle. So your view sheds are different. Your experience is very different. You're really trying to understand the use of throttle control. You don't have the ability to pump and push your bike over features. It's really more about speed control and understanding the feeling of the bike kind of falling away from you. So a few of the skills features we're really kind of starting to push is that feeling, that experience of going to something blind, starting to feel your bike move away from you. But it's also another opportunity for riders to start to take what they learned in the beginner skills area and actually link it into a trail system. So this diagram, similar to the last one, just starts to look at how that system works along with the overall bike park. So this really is kind of the outer edge loop that connects through the space. So again, a series of images that show that connectivity and some of those skills features as they move through the area or this zone. Again, really kind of thinking about this beginner experience to starting to lean towards this intermediate experience of that space. So again, a series of bike skills features that start to take that progression from the beginner skills area into more of a trail riding experience. Moving into the pump track zone. One of the big focuses here is progression. We've heard that kind of through a series of comments in our meetings, as well as an online survey that we have running live right now, is ensuring that the pump track is a place that does not get boring and is usable for all skilled riders. So what we do have in our design is really kind of focused on everything from a beginner rider on a strider bike or even someone in a wheelchair using the space to these more progressive features that you kind of start to see on that top center image there of having these edges where riders can actually jump and progress a little bit more within the pump track as while still having that kind of, if you can see where my cursor is, there's always kind of this easier line through the space or pumpable line through the space. The other thing is really just thinking about the space in between, right? So we need to ensure that we're collecting water. We want to make sure that we're putting that water into the ground and cleaning that water as it goes into the ground. So the use of plant material and gravel drainage systems to really kind of deal with the water in these areas. So quickly going to the plan, and this is an evolving design right now, but the beginner pump track is what you see there on the west side or the left side of the screen. This idea of having a loop system or a circuit with pretty broad and wide open turns. So it could be used for everything from an adaptive cyclist to a balance bike. All the features within this zone are a little bit smaller in scale and easier to maneuver. And one of the other components here we're talking about is having some of these more playful elements within that space. So just examples of some of those bowls within that area that could be played in. Adjacent to that is the larger intermediate advanced track. So that's really that area of starting to push progression. And just kind of take you for a lap here. We have basically the main start mound adjacent to that central hub. There are connective mounds in some of these corners where there's transition between the jump line back into the pump track, as well as the center space as a stop pause moment. But we're really pushing the idea of having this exterior loop that has some of those more progressive jump features that loop back around, as well as the central loop, where you get to start to kind of push your limits on rollers and berms, and there's opportunities for you to flow in and out of all these spaces and actually ride the entire track, kind of all the spaces that are called out in gray. So this series of diagrams really starts to kind of share some of that thought behind how all these components can kind of be transition zones and multiple ride features within the space. So that top left diagram there is really starting to kind of show what I was just describing, this outer loop in that darker purple, as well as the inner loop in the more of that lighter blue color. But as you kind of work your way through the space, you can see how this whole space and these inner loops and outer loops can become transitional zones. The one thing I do want to highlight too is that the goal for this track is to be directional to try to reduce the amount of conflict among riders within the space. So you'll see that all these circulation patterns kind of run in a counterclockwise direction. The other thing we had talked about is opportunities for pump jams and programming and things like that here, or time trial races. So this diagram here on the top right here starts to look at how you can use basically the whole track as a connected loop, inside and outside loop. The other thing to highlight here too is just, again, all these areas in darker gray, well, they are kind of spaces where paved surfaces kind of run into each other, and the inner loop and outer loop kind of connect. There are also transition zones between the tracks, or the loops within the track, I should say. And then moving into the jump lines. So one of the things we discussed in some of our stakeholder meetings is materiality within the space. And I think one of the big things that came out of that meeting is really the use of asphalt, similar to what's used in the pump track, to be the jump surfaces within the jump lines. And the nice thing about that is it allows us to be a little bit more flexible in the shaping of the space, and then providing a hard, more durable surface on that. So it's less maintenance. So you can kind of see we're calling that out as hatched on these. Some of the other features we talked about are these wall ride structures or these on-off structures that fall within the space. In some of our stakeholder meetings, there's been some discussion too in regard to more progression in this area than was provided before. So we did actually do a whole separate online survey just specifically about the jump line and talking about progression. So what we did start to develop in this diagram here, this layout here, is kind of this secondary route off the intermediate line, which has some additional advanced skills features. So again, just constantly thinking about progression or use of progression within the space. So the new layout for this area, and this is probably the biggest thing that's changed since the last diagram you all have seen, is really thinking about that beginner zone and having its own start mount and having a very safe separation between beginner riders and the intermediate and advanced riders. So then once you move into this zone where the blue and the black lines kind of meet, everyone's sharing that first jump feature. So this is really helping control the riders kind of using it progressively and one rider at a time as they enter the space. And once you move into that second feature, depending on your riding ability, you can branch out and kind of use the more progressive or bigger features on that black line side or continue on the blue line. And then kind of exit out there at that location. And then, as mentioned, we're in the process of kind of pushing forward and really thinking about the stormwater management on site and the landscaping and how that shapes within the bike park. So again, just thinking about the plant material, the use of plant material within those what I'll call negative spaces or not riding spaces within the bike park, as well as the stormwater collection. So this diagram is really starting to look at those low points that we'll create within the overall bike park to collect water, kind of clean it, treat it, and get it back into the ground to ensure there's no sediment runoff within the bike park. And that's the last slide.
So I think the pump track's going to be an attraction for folks on skateboards and longboards. Just curious.
Yeah, they tend to be, and a lot of times we're really trying to be mindful of that too, in regard to those spaces being all wheels capable. So everything from a scooter to a skateboard can ride on these surfaces. I think that's probably I think that could also be mitigated too in regard to if the desire is to not have those users on the space. I think it's more of a conversation.
Guess we'll see how that unfolds.
So what's going to happen in the winter? We have about 6 months where we have snow on the ground. Are we going to clear it? Are going to be parts that will be open, other parts that won't be open, or what are your thoughts?
That's a good question. And one of the things that came up too is obviously you all have your groomed cross-country trails, right, in these spaces within a lot of the trail systems that are outlined in white here. And what we've been discussing too is that opportunity to add some of those multi-directional trails or the tan trails within the space to those groomed trails. So really kind of expanding and having an additional looping for cross-country use. I think it becomes kind of a user-based experience in regard to whether folks are out here shoveling off the pump track, for example. You see that a lot in skate parks across the country. I know there's a few in Utah that we're building pump tracks adjacent to that folks are out there shoveling off the skate park, right after a snowstorm and clearing it off. So I think there's definitely considerations there in regard to how these spaces are used within the winter.
Yeah, it'd be nice to sort of think through that because all the white trails there are currently groomed by headwaters. Not every time it snows, but frequently. But there may be parts of the bike park that we could do some snow removal and they could be used year round or most of the year, right?
One of the things to consider with that though is that ice. You get ice built up on those and riding bikes, treacherous. I'm here to tell you. I used to be a risk manager at Winter Park, and ice and frost on features in bike parks are really sketchy. So I think that would be something that,
right?
yeah, they would be on their own.
Yeah,
I mean, I
right.
think getting it ready as soon as possible so people can start using it,
Yeah,
would be great.
time for snow removal early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've discussed possibly having kind of some kid-friendly Nordic options. The consensus was to kind of focus on the design for bikes and then see what we can do with it. But Headwater Trails Alliance has been involved in those conversations
Yeah.
and they do the grooming
But
there.
people that have fat tar bikes can ride, you know, in snow. It's not a problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that that adaptive and skills trail is a great opportunity to, you know, think about as a continued loop for fat tire bikes too.
Yeah.
Fun.
Well, one other question, are we planning any type of concessions in this area?
Not currently.
I'm just wondering, it might make sense. Some, you know, some basic food or drink offerings. Maybe an opportunity for the town to make some money too, but
We do
Mhm.
have that same service road that use that road for fire and ice to get to some of those areas there for that event. So, I mean, you have a service road there that you could pull some food trucks or something into.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
There's usually a food truck at the liquor store.
true. So we could have that, and the bathrooms are just north, I'm sorry, yeah, north
Just off.
of that.
Yeah, just off the screen there
So it
in
may
that
make sense.
northwest.
It's great. A food truck's a great idea, but you know, just maybe think it through because people are going to want something, and the only option would be to go to Safeway or. Right.
That's true.
No, I think we could definitely consider that. I mean, we've talked a lot in grant applications and whatnot too about this bringing people into Fraser and giving them an opportunity to stay and play in town and visit local businesses before or after, you know, to grab a coffee or breakfast burrito,
Right.
whatnot.
But you
Yeah.
know, their parents or grandparents or whomever's with them aren't going to want to get on their bike and ride around.
Yep.
Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, that's definitely worth considering.
Yeah. And we did touch on kind of the whole concept of the programming too, and like pump jam events or like beginning of the season events or jump events and how those can be a little bit more festival like you know, seasonally within the space.
For a creative winter use, I believe Paul was telling us about a winter putt-putt, and if it's all contoured and that might be,
Oh yeah.
I was just gonna add, there are no public utilities in that area to put a permanent structure there. Getting the bathrooms tied into Winter Park Ranch was a feat. And to bring something down to that central hub, we have no utilities there. So the town doesn't have sewer line there. It would be uphill to hit the sewer trunk line along the access road. And the closest water line that's town owned is down at the corner by the Snowcat. So permanent structure doesn't really work from a utility standpoint, but food trucks can obviously be brought to the service road back along that trail to be accessed. Yeah.
So the landscaping, it looks like there's turf. Is it artificial turf, real turf? Who's going to be mowing it? How's that work?
No,
Native
so
weeds and grass.
Pretty
yeah.
manicured.
So yeah, no,
Those
I
are just the
apologize
pictures.
for those images in some of the pump tracks. I mean, yeah, it could be everything from AstroTurf on the interiors, but I think the real focus in what we've been discussing is native seed mixes and really you know, all the landscape around and in and around the riding trails being something that's going to be more native and low maintenance. But also have deep roots and ensure that water infiltrates into the ground as quickly as possible. So leaning more towards kind of the image you see in the bottom left there to some of those earlier images on that inspiration sheet in regard to prairie grasses and flowering plant material that's more native species to the area.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
You have a lot of images where you are using like gravel rocks for yeah, get the water flow off the track, but do you see kids throwing those rocks onto the track?
Yeah.
Bikers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen this. You see this in a lot of these pump tracks where there's these sump drain systems. I think one of the bigger things, and I actually ran into this in my previous career, designing a play space within a zoo landscape, where we actually thought about the size of rock material and what's a little harder for kids to kind of go around and pick up and move around versus some of the smaller stone that gets used. So we could talk through, you know, what the appropriate size material would be for that.
and your children.
Yeah.
Sound like something your kids would do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Kids love to throw rocks.
Oh, do they?
No, this looks great.
Yeah,
Really exciting.
it is exciting. Very
Awesome.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Public?
So Elliot Leslie with Skinny Traffic Trails, talked to you guys a few times already through this process, but I guess just what I see now that the design's coming together, I'm really impressed with what they've been able to do. I think it's kind of a challenging site, just kind of with the shape and the flat terrain and the drainage issues. And it seems like they did a really good job of hitting on like all the components that were intended to be like incorporated into it. And it's a good balance between everywhere from like very beginner stuff into some more advanced things. So it's going to be a pretty like broad user group that's going to be able to enjoy it. And I think that was really important from the planning committee side in the beginning to make sure that like there was still stuff for, you know, more advanced riders. And I think they've done a good job kind of covering all the bases with that. I do really like also that Avid's working with adaptive riders in the design process to take that into consideration. And I think that's an important user group that we need to include. And I know that their team includes special like advisors of well-known adaptive advocates and riders. So I think that's a really good thing that they're offering as well. So and just through our more direct meetings with Avid, they've been really good just in the conversations and feedback and discussions, just kind of working collaboratively, and seems to me that going in the right direction. So.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot. Anybody online? Anything else to add? Okay.
We do then have a resolution if you would like to approve the Fraser Bike Park Avid conceptual design.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2025-0204, approving the Avid Bike Park conceptual design.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thanks,
Okay,
Sarah.
go,
Thanks,
go, go.
everybody. Yeah, this is great.
Get on, go, go.
Very excited about it. Okay, moving on to updates. Anything from the board? I think just one thing. A bunch of the CDOT folks for the mountain rail side of CDOT, they're going to be taking the ski train up and tomorrow, and a bunch of them are going to get off in Fraser. So I'm going to meet those folks at the Fraser station when they get here, probably like 9:30, 9:45-ish.
Okay.
So if any of you guys want to join, you can get a photo with those guys or something.
And this is for the Mountain Rail project.
Yep.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, ski train as well. So kind of both. And then, yeah.
What are they going to be doing? They're just going to spend the day in Fraser?
Some of them are going to be skiing, and other ones are just going to be kind of touring around town. So, yeah, we'll tell them about our projects, and they can go walk and see them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, on Monday, we will be presenting to the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership to look to cover the majority of our gap that we have for St. Louis Landing for phase 1. We anticipate if that goes well and the grant agreement is approved, and we have some luck on March 4th for our 2 presentations for DOLA for an additional some additional funding for the childcare facility and for infrastructure funding. We're thinking we're going to be ready to have the discussion about a notice to proceed for St. Louis Landing, having that gap filled and considering bringing that to the board for a decision to move forward with phase 1 of St. Louis Landing. So it's getting teed up well, and we're hopeful and hoping to bring that to you and sometime here in the near future.
So at this stage, the infrastructure work that they've been doing, has it been on hold for weather, or do we just at the point where they've done their
It's on hold
what was
for
expected?
weather. They're also, Phase is also the contractor who is working Clayton Court and St. Louis Landing.
Gotcha.
And they're finishing up on Clayton Court.
Yeah,
And be looking at continuing work on St. Louis Landing when weather does permit.
Great.
And so there's a subcontractor at the landing.
They're a subcontractor to Big Valley. Okay. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
We had a JFOC meeting as well. Quarterly meeting. Oh, sorry.
There was a JFOC meeting, a quarterly meeting. I think fairly standard stuff. The topic again was the industrial pretreatment, the breweries and distilleries. I think I was actually more worked up going in. I came out more comfortable that Fraser storefronts seem to be compliant. I do have concerns that we may have satellite breweries that we don't know about. But I think as long as we're compliant, we're in a good place. It's a shame we're not 100% compliant across the board, but that's where we're at. And I'm feeling much more comfortable with Fraser's position.
We also had a meeting with the chamber, and I think it went well. So they're, I guess, thinking about us being a member. So,
You say a member having a position for someone from the town of Fraser on the board.
mhm.
Gotcha.
So it will require them to amend their bylaws to add one additional seat for Fraser representation from the elected board here. I did meet again with Catherine Ross yesterday, and we'll be scheduling a workshop to talk through the 2025 chamber work plan at a meeting in March. I'm not sure which meeting that's going to be. That works with everyone's schedules. But following that conversation, as long as the board feels comfortable with the approach with the work plan, she said that they feel comfortable moving forward with that amendment to their bylaws to add that additional seat. But yeah, it's been a good conversation. Good conversation with Peggy at that meeting with the chamber, and yeah, I think we're in good shape for that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is the Fraser Housing Authority having an executive session. So what we can do is actually adjourn this meeting and then open up the Fraser Housing Authority meeting, go into executive session, and then adjourn once we return.
Okay.
So,
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Then
I
we just,
move to open the Fraser Housing Authority meeting, which will begin with an executive session.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Ellie.
We have to read the executive session.
we will, yeah.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
We take a 2 minute.
I move to enter into an executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators. Under CRS Section 24-6-402 4E deed restriction applications to include Town Manager Michael Brock, Town Assistant Manager Sarah Catanzarite, and Town Clerk Antoinette McVeigh.
I'll second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?